Well, Governor Cuomo unveiling his budget during the State of the State address. Certainly sticking the chest out, boasting a little bit. But the question is, are New York City and Blasio getting roasted by it? Then GE moving from Connecticut to Boston, and the Rams leaving St. Louis to move back to LA. How far should states and regions go to keep their companies or their teams? Also, a top presidential historian joined us in the studio to discuss whether we could see history repeating itself in both Republican and Democratic races for the White House. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. We do start tonight with Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, frenemies who now have a whole new thing to disagree about. Like that governor, he just announced the new state budget, and here are some of the headlines. I'll give you a hint. It's about spending a whole lot of money. Cuomo, he wants to balance the budget, among many, on the back of New York City. Cuomo budget could mean real pain for the city, and the Daily News says it hands Bill, as in Bill de Blasio, the bill. Get it? Now, my question for the panel, why is Cuomo doing this? And to help us is Noam Bramson. Noam's the Democratic mayor of New Rochelle. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. He was up in Albany for the State of the State. Chris Shays, former Republican congressman from Connecticut. We'll drag him into this conversation anyway. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Okay. Dom was there where we're doing the math. He's over $100 billion in terms of projects. Forget about how he's going to pay for it. Leave that detail. We still don't know how the TZ is getting paid for. But how about you as a mayor? Was this music to your ears, what he was saying? Because certainly the mayor of New York City didn't like it.
Well, look, from a parochial perspective, it was a mixed bag. There are some things that I was disappointed with. I would have liked to have seen an increase in AIM funding and CHIPS funding, which is essential as municipalities try to balance their budgets and take care of their infrastructure.
On the Medicaid side, is that going to hurt you?
Well, Medicaid is something that would affect the county, or in this case, New York City, but localities don't deal with Medicaid here in Westchester. On the plus side, the expansion of the Environmental Protection Fund is good news. The initiative to invest in struggling downtowns is good news. So like most huge budgets, it's a mixed bag. And whether the positives or negatives balance out in a way that is beneficial to New Rochelle or New York City, I think is something that's not entirely clear yet and will become clearer as we evaluate the components.
Dom, do you think if probably the most enjoyable thing in Andrew Cuomo's life, smacking Bill de Blasio around, wasn't on the table, would he have stuck it to any mayor in New York City as bad as he did yesterday, or no?
No. Anyone that knows anything about Mr. Cuomo knows that he's an expert at causing damage and not leaving his fingerprints on it. He's done that for a very long time in terms of getting his father elected as governor. But now he's doing it and leaving his fingerprints on it, and he's enjoying it, and he's enjoying the fact that the mayor was sitting right there. I noted with great interest as the lieutenant governor introduced all the mayors yesterday. I really was like, is he going to let her announce de Blasio? And he did. She did announce de Blasio, but he was last. She announced the mayor of New York, of the state's largest city. They went through a litany of mayors, and then de Blasio last. So yes, Richard, this is a situation where Cuomo is enjoying every minute of it, and boy, did he stick it to de Blasio.
But it's really all for show, because once this thing gets through the legislature, the burden's not going to be as big on New York City. You don't think the New York City delegation, which is pretty substantial in both the Senate and the Assembly, is going to whittle some of that down and shift some of the balance?
On that part, you are accurate, on that part. But the part where the governor is almost taking de Blasio out completely.
Homelessness, right?
He took de Blasio's biggest rival, the most competent Democrat that could challenge de Blasio for mayor and say, hey, by the way, I'm putting you in charge of auditing the shelters. So he gave Scott Stringer literally, he just gave him an issue where he can take de Blasio. At any point he wants to, this shelter's not effective, I'm shutting it down. Instant headlines.
I've never seen you so excited.
Well, I guess de Blasio does that, Congressman.
Come on, you had to be at a certain point like, I'm glad I don't have an enemy there at all.
Yeah, but you know something, de Blasio, to his credit, I think was a lot smarter in his reaction to this event than he was in prior reactions. He took it calmly.
Yes.
He complimented the budget in many respects.
Yes.
He sort of didn't play ball in terms of this ongoing narrative of a feud between the two of them, and I think that serves him well.
Good point.
Andrew, the city, though, by getting shortchanged, usually that's not the place that's targeted. We've seen in many places, Western New York, upstate New York being forgotten. Not this governor. And there's different theories as to why. He spent a lot of his time in Albany, obviously, as a youth with his father, then governor. But it's an interesting choice to make an example of being the city. Sure, a lot of the infrastructure would be in the city, whether it's the Javits, Penn Station, even Long Island. If you look at, LIRR, who knows where it'll get built, or even MacArthur and the rest. But certainly, if he was taking a scalpel to one region in the state, it was the 5 boroughs.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, he is targeting New York City with a lot of the proposals, but a lot of the cuts that he's calling for. But he's really not targeting the city. He's targeting the mayor. And I think a lot of this is just political back and forth with Mayor de Blasio.
We're not subsidizing you anymore. You're going to have to come out of your own pocket.
But again, that's all up for negotiation, and that's all going to have to work its way through the legislature and the Senate. And I can't imagine that, considering how heavy the vote population is from New York City, and also from Westchester and Long Island, because they have a vested interest in New York City's success as well, I can't imagine that there's going to be the votes there. The Cuomo can actually get through the rest of his agenda without conceding some of that back to the city. He wants to make de Blasio look bad. He doesn't want to make New York City bad.
If the state's going to put up the money, New York City lawmakers aren't going to get in the way. They're not going to go run to defend Bill de Blasio. As long as somebody's dealing with the problem and they don't have to ask the taxpayers to dig in their pockets, have at it.
But there's still separation between the policy and the politician. I mean, they're not going to run to the aid of Bill de Blasio, but they're going to run to the aid of the programs that Bill de Blasio is ahead of because they benefit the city.
But the other part of the story, he's coming with a balanced budget. So if it stays balanced, the New York folks are going to have to find where to find the cuts somewhere else. And what this governor knows, he's a smart guy. He knows that he's in competition with, well, you could say 49 other states, but it clearly are the states around here. Yeah. And he wants to be the place that business comes.
Do you think, one of the things that came out of the Tappan Zee Bridge, which the last 20 years I've been hearing we're going to rebuild it, is he actually got it done. Now, we still don't know how he's going to pay for it, but Dominic every night sees what's building as he goes back over to Rockland. My point is the dirty secret that came out of this, just find a way to get the thing built. And somehow, some way, somebody's going to find the money, but at least there'll be a legacy of infrastructure improvements that nobody debates we don't need. But did he, I grant you it's not the hardest thing is to build something and have somebody else pay for it, but is that the secret to get anything built in this region?
Well, first off, New York City needs, it can't wait much longer. Yeah. And if they wait much longer, there will be a disaster and the politicians will pay heavy. So you want to be on that side of the equation that says, let's get it fixed.
You agree, right? Just build.
I do agree. And look, process is important, but 10 years from now, few people are going to remember process, but they will see a bridge that's been erected and that they're traveling on every day. And in terms of New York City, let's remember, there's a bigger picture here. I mean, the governor announced an initiative with respect to Penn Station. The governor's supportive of the MTA's long-term capital plan, which includes 4 new stations in the Bronx, connections from Long Island. All of those are substantial infrastructure investments in New York, which will benefit the New York economy. So I think just looking at one slice of all this and concluding that the governor is targeting New York City is not in fact correct. I think there's a balanced agenda which recognizes the importance of the city to the overall state economy.
Will you grant me this? The day that there's a tunnel from Rye to Long Island, right? I'll win a lottery ticket, okay? It ain't happening, but we'll have a study for it. Okay, I noticed the silence. All right, GE bolting from Connecticut and the Rams leaving St. Louis, going back to LA again. Should states and cities be spending taxpayer money to try and keep these big corporations and teams from packing up and heading out?